I wanted to ask you this about this word you have then that's related to Project Cybersyn, which is Dymaxsyn.
Yeah.
Uh, so this is described as a transitional step on the way to economic emancipation of communities and
Mhm.
the liberation of all classes from access inequality and its resulting social problems.
Yes.
Um, this word is a combination of the words cybersyn as well as Dymaxion. And Dymaxion is another word which comes from Buckminster Fuller, I believe, which
Mhm.
means the dynamic maximum tension. Uh, so it's
Yes.
sort of a way of doing things that, from my understanding, is trying to eke out the maximum amount of efficiency in terms of your application of force and the result that comes out of that. Um,
Yes.
do you want to just describe what the word Dymaxion, how that's related to your conception of the work that the Global Redesign Institute is doing?
Well, I chose the name because I thought the Global Redesign Institute was a bit of a mouthful, and also because that is associated with a sort of a pre-existing concept that I actually was not terribly familiar with when I got involved with it. I had just been making like I think many people in their own communities, I've just sort of been wandering around looking at things and imagining how they could be optimized. And I did a little video about it, and the next day someone was like, "Oh, hey, can you speak about the Global Redesign Institute at our event?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What's that?" And so I kind of started working on my own kind of understanding of what I thought it could be. And the result is the project that I'm here to talk about today. Um, but then somewhere along the line, I realized that sort of like a previous discourse around the name had already kind of started to happen. So I thought I should come up with a new name. And I am a big fan of Buckminster Fuller, and I see a kind of a beautiful tragedy in some of the things that he would say about, because he had things so clear in his mind and never really got to see those ideas take hold in a dominant way. Mm, and so I chose that word not just because of the meaning, of course, but I wanted to choose a word which had to do with Buckminster Fuller, um, to sort of pull my idea of him and the meme of functional equality that he sought to perpetuate into the present and into what I'm trying to do here. And then, and then the sin at the end of that is a nod to Project Cybersyn and all that it sought to create, because it's unclear to me whether Stafford Beer, the Project Cybersyn guy, was trying to get everyone to a point where we could be, voting directly in referendums with all of the data required to do so in a responsible and informed way, or whether his angle was like, if all of the people in the communities have the data, then they can choose to elect political officials in a more informed and consenting way. Either way, I think the first idea is the more functional in terms of the integrity of the democracy in the community in question.
Mm.
Um, but that was really the first time that anybody that I know of took a stab, like a meaningful stab, at at attaining a level of like access and what's like the opposite of disenfranchisement.
I mean,
Um,
you could just say enfranchisement or
okay.
participation or
Uh,
stake, even.
all great ones. Yeah, well, the first time that somebody took a stab at elevating the level of enfranchisement and equality through, a very technical way that seems to deal directly with the things which are coming in between communities and public health and equality.
Hmm. So one of the other taglines that's sort of associated with this concept here is to facilitate what you call structural satire, and I'm probably going to butcher this. Structural satire, satyagraha, the
That
design
was
in
that was awesome. Can you try that one more time?
sure structural
I
satyagraha.
like it.
Is that correct?
Why not? Sure. I say
Well, why don't
Satyagraha.
why don't you tell us how you pronounce it so the listeners know?
I'd say Satyagraha.
Satyagraha. Okay.
But
Which
words are just words, and it's fun
mm.
to play around with them and make them our own.
So the design and implementation of infrastructure which
Mhm.
supports and rewards nonviolent behavior. What is the connection between nonviolence and its incentivization that you're talking about with structural satyagraha, um, and the broader goal of establishing Dymaxsyn?
I think that's a really great question, and a complex and challenging question. So hopefully I'm going to be as efficient at answering it as I think I'm going to have fun answering it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So the connection between the two, well, basically Dymaxsyn is an educational platform is how it would start, which seeks to train communities to kind of step into their power in terms of agency and enfranchisement with regard to the development of the infrastructure which supports the communities. So particularly in an economic sense, where economics means, literally originally derives from the word oikonomia, which is Greek for management of the household.
Mhm.
Not like the weird bastardization, which is all like numbers and debt. Like that's not real economics. That's debt economics. That's trash economics. Nobody's interested in that. That shit's obsolete. But so Dymaxsyn is seeking to economically empower communities, and that's why the idea behind that is all of the regional data being made available. People can then see like what's going where and make choices about, oh, I want um, like, okay, well, which method of manufacturing, whatever thing that we as a community decide we need, whatever type of infrastructure it could be, whether it's a waste disposal system, an agricultural system, or an educational system, when we're laying the infrastructure to create these institutions, these things, these features of our economy. Where are we going to source our resources from? What is the most regenerative and sustainable practice in which we can that we can use to build, basically.
Mm.
And and in this way we're dealing with the allocation of resources, and with an open source and open access economy where all data is available, most things can be automated. I mean, that's just the reality we live in today. But with the idea of most things being automated and most economic information being open access and open source, we really set the stage for a potentially very egalitarian community with a very high level of public health, because it will be very easy for people within the community who want their community to have a high level of public health to allocate resources in such a way which facilitates that, and it's in the best interest of everybody in the community. And then so that's why why I coined the term structural satyagraha, because it's the idea of coding nonviolence into an economy, and of course, economy is the foundation of culture.
So by nonviolence, then you mean not just the absence of physical violence, but also other forms of economic coercion. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I forget who it was, but it was probably Gandhi, because he was the one who invented or who coined the term satyagraha. Because funnily enough, even in Sanskrit, which I think is one of the oldest languages that we have on record as humans, we don't have a word for nonviolence other than the negation of a pre-existing concept. In Sanskrit, we have ahimsa, which is the opposite of himsa. So it just means like no harm, whereas himsa is harm. And when Gandhi was coining the term satyagraha, what that means is the force of truth. So it's not just sort of being passive and submitting, but rather to go forward in a way which elevates the whatever the truth may be in that situation. And that takes into account the idea that the fundamental truth of all people is cooperation, really,
Mm,
because that's what's elevating us to be the best that we can be, to really step into our power as individuals and communities, to attain greatness in a way which also uplifts the planet. When everything's working together, that's the one. When everything's all competitive and shit's falling apart and everything's on fire, that's not the one. That's
mm,
not like the ultimate truth of us. Although, a pessimist and perhaps a realist would say that, perhaps that is going to be the truth that we're left with, but it's not the ultimate one. And so I use structural satyagraha because it's this idea of public health, that all that stuff that I just talked about, that's a very high level of public health in the sense of a community, but also in the sense of the global community. So it's the idea of the support and the implementation of infrastructure which upholds public health, and then framing it in that context of nonviolence, the force of truth. It really brings to mind, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Pickett's work, who wrote The Spirit Level, but are you?
I'm not totally familiar with it. I mean, I've heard of it. That's about it.
Okay, cool. Well, basically the idea, like in that book, there's a lot of studies detailing and showing how high levels of income inequality are directly correlated to high instances of violence and antisocial behavior, and basically a very low level of public health. So it's this idea that economic equality supports and upholds a very sound culture and a
Mm,
high level of public health.